They laughed at me that day. By the end of the night, no one was laughing. Just admin, my sister Jessica sneered, waving her diamond ring in my face. Nothing special about pushing papers, right, honey? Her fiancé nodded awkwardly. The entire dinner table erupted in polite laughter while I sat there, my cheeks burning with humiliation. The crystal chandelier lights seemed to spotlight my embarrassment as everyone joined in on the joke. Everyone except Thomas, Jessica's fiancé, who looked at me with genuine curiosity. "So, what do you actually do?" he asked. One word was all it took. "I'm Olivia, 32, and for years I've lived in my sister's shadow, the plain one to her glamorous existence, the practical daughter with the modest job. At least, that's what my family thought." While Jessica flaunted her engagement to a wealthy hedge fund manager, I worked silently, building something far beyond what anyone in my family could imagine. Something that would change everything on the night they thought they were celebrating her, not me. If you've ever been underestimated or betrayed by family, subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your story deserves to be heard, just like mine finally was that night. My parents always showcased Jessica's achievements, her modeling contracts, her social connections, her perfect relationship, while treating my career choices as disappointing. "Such a shame," my mother would say at family gatherings. "Olivia was always so bright in school. Now she just files things." What happened at that engagement dinner changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who thought they knew me. It was Jessica's engagement dinner at Le Cirque. She'd insisted on the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind with crisp white tablecloths, waiters who never let your water glass get below half full, and where the silverware costs more than most people's monthly rent. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with the aroma of gourmet food as champagne flowed freely. Jessica kept introducing Thomas to extended family members I barely recognized, making sure everyone saw her massive diamond ring catch the light with every gesture. "This is my cousin from Boston," she'd say, then lower her voice to add, "He's in finance too, honey, very well connected." Everything was strategic with Jessica. Everyone was a potential stepping stone. When the conversation turned to careers around the elegantly set table, Jessica spoke for everyone as if she were the family spokesperson. "Dad's the surgeon," she said proudly, gesturing to our father who nodded with his practiced smile. "Mom's the gallery owner," she continued as our mother touched her pearls. "I'm in fashion, of course." She flipped her hair dramatically. "And Olivia," she paused, her eyes meeting mine with that familiar gleam of superiority. "Olivia does some admin work." The way she said admin made it sound like I sorted trash for a living. "She's always been the practical one," my mother added with that particular smile that conveyed both pity and disappointment. "Not everyone can be ambitious." The words stung like a paper cut, small but surprisingly painful. My sister continued, leaning into Thomas's side possessively. "She's basically just pushing papers at some office downtown. Right, sis? Just admin." The laughter that followed stung worse than her words. I could feel my face growing hot as I stared at my untouched appetizer. Then, something unexpected happened. Thomas, Jessica's perfect fiancé, looked at me with genuine interest. "So what do you actually do?" he asked. The table went quiet as all eyes turned to me. I set down my fork carefully, making sure it didn't clink against the fine china. "Acquisitions," I answered simply. The silence stretched for a beat before conversation resumed. No one knew what to make of my answer, and honestly, that was exactly how I'd planned it. But this moment didn't happen in isolation. The seeds were planted long ago. 3 months earlier, Jessica had borrowed my car for a photo shoot. I remember standing in the parking lot of my apartment building at 6:30 a.m., checking my watch repeatedly as I waited for her to arrive. When she finally pulled up 45 minutes late, my Toyota had an empty tank and coffee stains on the passenger seat. "Sorry about the mess," she said, not sounding sorry at all as she tossed me the keys. "It's just a Toyota, Liv, not like you need to impress anyone." I was late to a meeting with potential investors that day, a meeting where I secured $2 million in funding, but Jessica never asked how my day went. Last Christmas was even worse. Our family gathered around the tree, opening gifts one by one. Jessica tore into her packages with childish glee, exclaiming over the designer handbag from our parents and the gold bracelet from Thomas. When I opened my gift, a sleek leather-bound planner, Jessica snorted. "A work planner? God, how boring are you?" She turned to our cousins with an exaggerated eye roll. "This is what happens when your entire personality is being a secretary." No one noticed that I was planning the biggest deal of my career in that planner. A deal that would eventually be worth billions, It's perfect, I'd said quietly, running my fingers over the embossed cover. Exactly what I needed. 2 weeks before the engagement dinner, Jessica called me at 2 a.m. Not because she was worried about me or wanted to talk. She needed help with her resume. "You're good with that office stuff," she said, her words slightly slurred from whatever cocktail party she'd just left. "Fix it for me. I need it perfect by tomorrow afternoon." When I explained that I had an early meeting I couldn't miss, she snapped, "It's not like your job matters, Olivia. This is for a spread in Vogue, an actual important opportunity." I stayed up until 4 a.m. fixing her resume. My meeting the next day was with the board of directors, where we finalized our strategy for the fintech global acquisition. I presented with 2 hours of sleep, fueled by black coffee and the knowledge that soon, very soon, everything would change. Then came my sister's bridal shower. I'd offered to help, thinking it might be a chance for us to bond. Instead, Jessica announced to her friends as they arrived, "Olivia can handle the decorations and cleanup. She's so good at organizing papers." More laughter as her friends glanced at me with vague pity. I smiled through it while reviewing acquisition documents worth billions on my phone. The irony wasn't lost on me as I adjusted the floral arrangements with one hand and approved wire transfers with the other. The night before the engagement dinner was the final straw. I'd laid out my black dress, simple but elegant, perfect for a nice restaurant. When I came home from work, the dress was gone. Jessica had borrowed it without asking. She returned it just hours before the dinner with a wine stain on the sleeve. "You wouldn't have worn it anyway," she shrugged when I confronted her. "Not like you get invited to important events." I wore a navy blue dress instead, the one I'd worn to sign the Mercer deal. What my family never noticed were the small signs of who I really was. The sleek business card I kept in my wallet, no title, just my name and a phone number. Jessica had spotted it once while borrowing cash from my purse. "What's this?" she'd ask, turning the minimalist card over in her hand. "It's nothing," I'd said, taking it back and tucking it away quickly. That nothing was the private contact information given only to the most elite financial players in the world. Then there were the calls I took in private during family gatherings, speaking in careful, measured terms about the Frankfurt deal and board approval. My family assumed I was talking to friends or maybe a boyfriend they'd never meet. They never listened closely enough to hear the details. What they didn't know, every time they mocked my admin job, I was one step closer to finalizing a merger that would reshape an entire industry. Every time they pitied my simple lifestyle, I was signing documents that would make me wealthier than all of them combined. I remember the quiet respect in my assistant's voice when she called during one Sunday dinner at my parents' house. "Miss Reynolds, the Singapore team is ready for you," she'd said. I'd excused myself, and my mother had sighed loudly, always with the work calls, as if they can't manage without you for one dinner. If only she knew that my assistant managed my calendar of meetings with CEOs and investment bankers, that they included some of the most powerful people in global finance. What they didn't realize was that while they were laughing, I was signing the papers that would change everything. Back at the engagement dinner, after I'd answered Thomas's question with that single word, acquisitions, my phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced at it discreetly. It was my mentor, Elaine, former Wall Street powerhouse turned venture capitalist, texting me. "They approved the terms. We announce at market open Monday." I felt a smile tug at my lips as I returned the phone to my purse. 3 years of work was about to pay off in spectacular fashion. As the main course arrived, I noticed Thomas's father studying me with interest. He was a finance industry veteran, and when I mentioned where my office was located during small talk, a knowing smile crossed his face. Unlike the others, he recognized what that address meant. That particular building on that particular floor wasn't for administrative assistants. "Interesting location," he commented casually. "How long have you been there?" "We moved in about 2 years ago," I replied. "The views are spectacular." Jessica grew increasingly smug as dinner progressed, planning her destination wedding aloud. "We're thinking Bali or maybe the Amalfi Coast," she announced. "Olivia can handle the spreadsheets for the guest list. That's what she's good at." More polite laughter. I just smiled and took a sip of my wine. My phone kept vibrating discreetly throughout dinner. Texts from my executive team finalizing the press release that would hit the financial news Monday morning. A press release that would send shockwaves through the market and change my life forever. As dessert was being served, Thomas's father leaned over and whispered, "You're not just in acquisitions. You're the acquisitions, aren't you?" I saw the rumors about who was behind the Mercer deal. I just gave him a small smile and a slight nod. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Then he asked loudly enough for the table to hear, "So, Olivia, Thomas mentioned you work at Blackwood Partners? The table fell silent. Thomas's father had just dropped the name of one of the most elite private equity firms in the world. You work at Blackwood Partners? He repeated carefully when I didn't immediately respond. I set down my dessert fork deliberately. The moment I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. No, I said quietly. I founded Blackwood Partners. Jessica's nervous laugh cut through the silence. Stop joking, Olivia. Tell them about your admin job. But Thomas was staring at me in shock. Blackwood just acquired FinTech Global for $4.2 billion. That was you? My mother's confused expression would have been comical if it wasn't so painful. What are they talking about, Olivia? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and showed them the Wall Street Journal alert that had just come in. Olivia Reynolds, youngest female CEO to complete acquisition exceeding $4 billion, reshaping financial technology sector. I watched as Jessica's fiancé Thomas suddenly understood exactly who his future sister-in-law was, a financial powerhouse his own firm had been trying to partner with for years. That admin work you've been mocking, I said, looking directly at Jessica. I've been building and running a private equity firm that now controls assets worth over $12 billion. The silence was deafening. I could almost hear the mental calculations happening around the table. My father's jaw had gone slack. My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. But the most satisfying reaction was Jessica's face draining of color as Thomas's family began asking me about market strategies and investment opportunities. We should discuss the Asian markets, Thomas's father said eagerly. I've been watching your moves in Singapore. Brilliant strategy. The devastating moment came when he added, we've been trying to get a meeting with Blackwood for months. If we'd known you were family. Jessica's perfect engagement dinner had suddenly become my coming out party. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, with attention shifted completely from Jessica's engagement to my work, the very work she'd dismissed for years. Questions flew at me from all directions. What was my investment strategy? How had I built the company so quickly? Was I really the mastermind behind the Mercer acquisition that had made headlines last year? I answered each question calmly, watching as my family's perception of me visibly shifted. My father, who had never once asked about my career, now leaned forward with rapt attention. My mother, who had always introduced me as her other daughter, the office worker, was suddenly telling people at neighboring tables, that's my daughter, the CEO. And Jessica sat in stunned silence, her perfect engagement dinner forgotten. When the evening finally wound down, we all stood outside the restaurant waiting for our cars. Jessica grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. Why didn't you ever tell us? She demanded, her voice a mixture of anger and hurt. I met her gaze steadily. You never asked, I replied simply. You were too busy telling everyone who you thought I was. Her eyes welled with tears. But we're sisters. Yes, I agreed. And that should have been enough for you to want to know me. The real me. The valet pulled up with my car, not the Toyota Jessica had stained, but a sleek black Mercedes that made her eyes widen. I'm speaking at your wedding, she said suddenly. You have to let me introduce you to everyone. My sister, the finance genius. I smiled sadly. I have a board meeting in Tokyo that week. Some admin work I can't miss. As I drove home that night, a strange sense of peace washed over me. The secret I'd carried for so long was finally out, but I realized something important. I'd never needed their validation. The quiet power I'd built spoke louder than their dismissals ever could. For the first time, I understood that success isn't about making noise, it's about making impact. And some impacts change the room forever. If you've ever had to prove your worth to those who doubted you, hit subscribe and share your story in the comments. You are not alone. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones closest to you, but your value isn't determined by their perception. Next week, I'll share how I built my company while my family thought I was just pushing papers. The strategy might surprise you. Remember, success doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it walks quietly into a room and changes everything with just one word.